Hi folks, I'm back, cutting through the matrix. And a matrix it truly is. It's the whole system in which you're born into. It's all reality that's given to you. It's even the explanation of the reality that's given to you. It's all part of the matrix. Because you're born into complete socially indoctrinated or engineered system, which included social indoctrination at school, in a scientific manner according to those who helped design the system. And the whole idea was that you'd never really figure your way out of it. And of course your parents didn't know either. They took everything for granted when they were born. Things are just the way it is. And they had no real interest in knowing what was really going on in the big world events, including what was happening with international treaties being signed with their own countries. They didn't even know, for instance, for years they were being amalgamated into and underneath a European parliament, and that their countries would become provinces under that parliament. And that's all been done. The same thing, of course, is still going on with the Americas, for uniting the Americas. It's been going on for many years. In fact, the first building, I think, was set up in 1910 or 1912 called the Building of the Americas. And the big foundations, even at that time, were pushing for amalgamation with Mexico for the U.S. and Canada eventually down the road. Yet this is how far back the big organizations set up their world agenda. And we're living through it. Now, part of that agenda was that everything would go international, and the richer countries would pay for the poorer countries to come up to a certain level of standard of living. And that's still what we're doing today. And the Marxists called it the redistribution of wealth. Of course, most folk in their countries thought, well, it's the wealthy who will have to pay for that. No, you see, they class you as wealthy even if you're renting in the Western countries. You're not going to get a job, but if you have a job, you're wealthy. And so that's where your tax money goes, is to be spread across the world. And it really doesn't end up helping the people at all. It ends up in big multinational or international corporations and sets up new buildings or factories really for them to own. That's how the system really has always worked. After World War II, they set up a Overseas Economic Development Corporation, parts of government, and under a section of the government. Canada has one as well. And generally, the left-wing politicians, when they step down from office, join that, and they get good positions in that, dealing with where the money goes to all these different countries. And most folk are oblivious that their country even has been doing that since the end of World War II. But now they're stepping it up and to the true Marxian program of redistribution of wealth, as they call it, taking from those who are going under to give to those who are already under. And that means we'll all be equally under the world dominant system once it's all finished. And that's where it's really going to go. That's why they brought on the financial crash when they did. I mean, how can it be a crash when the same banks are still in existence and making fortunes today? After their massive gifts from the taxpayer for the supposed losses they incurred with their own follies. What an incredible system we live in. And again, we take it all for granted, just like we take 9/11 for granted as with the aftermath of martial law, basically, across the whole darn world. Because of two buildings. That's never been thought of in history before. We've had world wars before, and even Pearl Harbor did not jolt the whole world suddenly to declare martial law across the whole planet. It didn't happen. But you see, it was planned to happen this time, because they did say, after the scam of the Y2K, the year 2000 nonsense, they said that really the century starts when 2001. And that's why you had it kicking off in 2001. That's why Arthur C. Clarke had his first novel, 2001. And 2010 really also is supposed to be the last year that Canada, Mexico, the U.S. signed the final part of integration into law. Where they started to implement it all at once, who knows? They've already done quite a lot already, because the federal bureaucrats in Canada can already apply to federal positions and bureaucracies in the U.S. and vice versa. That came out in the papers a few years ago after they signed, the second signing of their integration treaty. So that's the real world. And as I say, the banking crisis came on cue, and everything's going the way it's planned to go. The IMF is stepping up to its proper place, as John Maynard Keynes said it would do. He said in his own lifetime it was only going part way, but eventually it would be set up basically to be the banker under the World Bank for the entire planet. And they would deal with every country's finances, including their bookkeeping, by the way. They already are trying to get into Europe because of the last crash, and what they want, the rights under the European Parliament, under the watchful eye of the IMF, or on behalf, I should really say, of the IMF, to go over each country's books for themselves and start doing the bookkeeping. So it's another blow to any idea of national sovereignty. National sovereignty, they said 100 years ago, would have to go to get this big, wonderful utopian plan through. And of course, all their utopias means a horror show for someone else. The Soviet Union was to be a utopia. And look at the slaughtering spree they went on, even starving millions of their own people to death near the beginning of it. And the Ukrainians were starved to death. 30 million, I think, of them. Millions of them. Never mind the ones they slaughtered too for having different opinions than themselves. That's what you always find about the liberal mentality, where they always talk about caring for everyone. Unless you go along with their political correctness, they have no tolerance at all for any other opinion. None whatsoever. They are completely intolerant of anyone else's opinion. That's the reality of the world we live in.